Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Literal Journey, a show about fantastic authors of great stories, because I believe that great stories can literally help us on our journey through life. So you see, there's a little bit of wordplay in there. Okay, so early today, I had just this amazing opportunity to interview my friend Jonathan Stroud. Now, I say early this morning because I had to wake up. I wake up anyway. I got lots of kids and lots of issues, so I'm always up. But the interview had to take place pretty early because of the time zone. I'm in the Salt Lake area, and he's over in London. So we did the interview this morning early. It was fantastic, and I wanted to share it with you. But first, let me just give you kind of a little bit of an overview of who Jonathan Stroud is. Jonathan Stroud is the author of two internationally best-selling series, the award-winning Bartimaeus sequence, which has been published in 36 languages. 30, 36, sweet Moses. 36 languages worldwide, and the critically acclaimed Lockwood Co series, which that's easily one of my favorite series. I mean, it's like top one. I love that series. And they made it into a Netflix series, which was phenomenal. It was a huge success. So anyway, he lives in London, which is why we had to do the interview so early. But anyway, Jonathan actually just published the third book in his latest series, and his latest series is the Scarlett and Browne series. Now, this is the first book in that, but the third is coming out real soon in America. It's already out in the UK. And I am halfway through the second book. It's incredible. Jonathan Stroud has this unique ability to write very suspenseful, almost dark or scary scenes, but with humor and life that just I don't know. It makes it all worth it. It's an adventure. The Scarlett and Browne series, I'll let him describe it a little bit more to you, but it's quite the adventure. A lot of humor, a lot of heart, and I really enjoy it. I couldn't recommend it more highly. If you want to purchase any of his books, and I recommend the Lockwood Co series, that's my personal favorite. You can go down into the links below. I'll have it all for you there. But without further ado, let's jump into my interview with Jonathan Stroud. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for agreeing to do this interview. It really means a lot to me.
Oh, that's a real pleasure, Seth. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. So first of all, for those who aren't familiar with you or your writing, which I can't imagine why, I have a lot of Lockwood and Co fans that are following me now. But tell us a little bit about yourself and the things you've written.
Yeah, so I've been a freelance writer for more than 20 years, and I've written kind of rather to my surprise and horror, I've actually written 16 different novels, which sort of sounds like a proper shelf now. But my first series that actually sort of did well, made me internationally known, was the Bartimaeus series, about a genie called Bartimaeus, which began with the Amulet of Samarkand, and that came out about 2003 in the United States. And I did that series, and after that, I did a series called Lockwood Co, which was made into a Netflix show a couple of years ago, which was really great. I really enjoyed working on that. And then just lately, I've been working on a different series, which is the about the outlaws Scarlett and Browne. So lots of fantasy stories, adventure, humor, lots of different things in the pot, and I very much enjoy it.
Well, it's the Scarlett and Browne series. The third one has just come out, at least in the UK. I believe the US one
Yeah,
is coming out soon.
it is indeed. Yeah, it's coming out towards the end of March, 2025. Yeah.
And that's just the edition where they take out the U's in color and and all those
Yeah,
unnecessary vowels, right?
yeah, and they add lots of commas. Yeah, the US goes for more commas than the UK, and fewer, yeah, fewer U's. That's right.
I've noticed that we're just marking our inflection points where we're pausing. That's what it
And the
becomes.
the crazy thing is that I actually get to the point where I don't have a preference. I'm actually kind of happy either way. It's
Yeah.
I get so confused, but by the commas, it's yeah, it's always good.
Oh, it's the letters that throw me off because in Canada, my dad he has a lot of heritage in Canada, and so he'll write things, and I'm like, what? Why are you putting those letters in there? That's not the American way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, what?
Dodgy.
So just tell us a little bit about Scarlett and Browne. Give our listeners sort of the premise of the series.
Yeah, so the kind of initial idea was that it was going to be a British Western. So it would kind of have quite a few tropes and sort of ideas which would be familiar from sort of the classic American Westerns, but it would be in a British setting. In the far future, it's kind of post-apocalyptic. There's some big changes have happened. The world is altered. Britain is no longer quite as sort of harmless and rubbish as it is in reality. It's much more the landscape has become much more fierce and sort of epic. And there are little towns surviving, but most people are kind of in these towns and they're keeping themselves shut off from the world. And outside there are these large animals and cannibals running around, and it's a much more sort of scary place. And I decided I was going to have a couple of heroes who were sort of outsiders, bank robbers, outlaws, who go wandering around having adventures and exploring this strange world.
Now, I listened to an interview you did with Amy McCaw, and you had talked about how the idea was there, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. You actually, as you were writing, you were discovering the story as you were
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
It talked just a little bit about that, and then I just have a question about how you present something like that to a publisher, where you say, "Here's my basic idea, but I'm gonna work it out," because
yeah.
as we discussed earlier before this recording started, um, it was, I guess it was originally pitched as just 2 books, but then it became, I guess it evolved into 3 books. So
Yeah,
just talk a little bit about the fleshing the story out.
well, that's right. Because I don't know what other writers do. I mean, I think everyone's different. For me, usually what happens is I'll get a kind of concept, or I'll think, okay, British Western, and I might get an opening scene or a kind of opening idea. Like for example, in this case, I had a couple of really kind of strong images. Like I saw my heroes traveling down the River Thames on a raft, and the River Thames in reality is kind of not very exciting. But I kind of imagined it being this much more sort of epic, ferocious kind of experience, and I really like this idea. London was going to be underwater. I kind of all kinds of interesting ideas, but I didn't know what the story was. And usually, what happens is it's like a jigsaw. You start with the piece in the middle of the jigsaw, and you've got this little tiny scene or something, and you build outwards from that. You're slowly piecing it together. Eventually, after several years of work, you'll end up with 3 books, and you can see the whole picture. But you start just with this bit in the middle. So when you go to the publishers originally, usually you'll have a chunk of text. Like I will usually bring them 30 or 40 pages, so like maybe a section of the book, so it's enough for them to actually read it and go, okay, they can see it, they can start to see it themselves. And I'll have maybe a plan of how I think the book is going to go. But it's never been written, and it always changes, it always alters as you write, which I think keeps it, there's an element of danger in there, but it keeps it fresh, and it keeps you nimble. You can make different decisions as you go, and the publishers generally accept this. They're happy if you if you deliver it on time, and ultimately the end result is a satisfying structure.
Um, how much of the story that you presented to them stayed the same, from what you showed them and then what you kind of pitched? I mean, did it
I
change
think
quite a bit?
Well, I think but I tend not to show things to them until I'm fairly confident, for example, that the characters are kind of right, and usually, usually the first chunk I give them is fairly robust. Um, Then what happens is they'll say, great, go ahead, and I'll do a draft, and that full draft of the book may well have things in it which ultimately I remove. I'll give it back to the editors eventually, and they'll come back to me with their comments. And I remember with the first book, there were several scenes when the guys are heading down the river where I had various adventures happening. And when we reread it, I was like, well, we don't actually need this. We can kind of cut some of these fights or these encounters. You can kind of cut it, make it faster. So at that point, you're looking to see that your story has the right rhythm and the right flow, isn't kind of dragging in various places. And so there are always things that you can take out to shorten it, to make it more sort of lithe and muscular. Yeah, so essentially you can have any number of drafts, and usually the editors get involved at some point and they give their comments, and I go away, and I don't always agree with them, but I'll do some of what they say.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's worked well for you in the past. I mean, your stories do flow, I mean, incredibly well. I mean, and you've told me about some massive edits that you made last
Oh, for
minute.
sure. Yeah, for
And
sure.
how you described it, it was that you were putting tape up in the back of the stage and hoping nobody else would see, because you're doing all these
Yeah.
edits, and hurrying to get it done. But it's worked very well. Obviously, as a writer, you're probably getting a dozen different ideas every day about different scenes, different books, different
Right.
stories, different all
Yeah.
sorts of things but then at some point there has to be a hook or something that just, for a story, that just grips you, where you say, this is it. This is the
Yeah,
thing
that's
I
true.
want to focus on. And I know for Lockwood Co, you said it was two characters with swords having a conversation at a door, and that's what gripped you.
Yeah.
And you said you wanted to explore that, and then it turned into this, this incredible book series and this Netflix series. And what was it about Scarlett and Browne that, before you really knew what the story was, what was the thing that just gripped you, where you're like, this is where I'm going to spend my time?
So for me, there were kind of two stages with Scarlett and Browne. There was so I had this quite strong visual image of my characters on a raft and having this raft journey, and the fact they would be kind of bickering and getting getting really annoyed with each other because they're on this tiny raft. And I also had a kind of strong image of a kind of outsider figure who was a kind of a very formidable, good with gun, good at keeping care of themselves, but actually very jaded and in need of kind of some sort of redemption. And the redemption was
Right.
going to come with this other character who would be very, very much the opposite. To begin with, so I had all these things in place, but to begin with, it didn't work because my characters weren't right. And the for a while, I had a kind of middle-aged guy who was the kind of jaded warrior type figure, and a girl who was a sort of young, who's going to be the innocent character. And I wrote various scenes, and I was like, it just didn't ignite. That I thought the ingredients were there because they were the opposite, and there were kind of dangers happening and stuff. But
Sort
I
of
was
like
so.
True Grit, the
Oh, which is yeah, absolutely, which is a great. That was a big influence
yeah.
actually on me, and I think to begin with, I wasn't getting far enough away from that. That was at the back of my mind. I was thinking, okay, that's a great sort of archetype. Maybe I can do something like that. But for me, it
Right.
wasn't quite working. And then eventually, I suddenly I had this sort of revelation that actually I needed to ditch the older the adult character, and make the girl into the jaded, formidable gunslinger character. And as soon as I did that, as soon as I made this girl into that figure, things began to happen. And then I could bring in a boy who was going to be kind of seemingly quite helpless and a bit annoying, and she would get really angry with him, but they'd kind of start to be really useful for each other. And as soon as I made that switch, that was when it began to sing on the page, and I knew that I was onto something. So sometimes you get these things straight away. Other times it takes quite a few months of working before you figure out the hook, like you said. You're right. There's always a hook, which is the thing that you hang everything on.
And at what point did you actually see an arc where you saw a conclusion, like there was a something you were going to build towards, like I
Yeah.
guess the main story that you wanted to tell, at what point in the writing process did that reveal itself to you?
Um, in this case, it revealed itself fairly early. If we're talking about the first book, that the first book had a kind of inbuilt structure, which was it takes it's basically a journey from the source of the River Thames down to the sea, down to where the Thames opens up into the lagoon where London used to be, but London is kind of drowned underneath this lagoon. So the whole book, the first book, is all really about this journey. They're getting chased by bad guys. They're trying to find things along the end. So there's a whole host of reasons why they're going down the river. And that I kind of knew how vaguely how I was going to end it. It was going to be ending a set piece on this kind of ruined, basically a ruined skyscraper sort of poking up out of the water. So I kind of had some very strong ideas about it, but I still didn't know quite how I was going to string it all together. And
Wow.
that was the excitement of the first book. I was trying to figure out like the stringing the neck. I think of it like a necklace. You're stringing the various beads on the necklace, and you've got to get the right order so that the necklace looks good. You don't want to have all the kind of big stones up at one end of the necklace and all the little ones on the other. Then it
Right.
doesn't look good. So you have to kind of get the balance and get the rhythm, and eventually you've got something that you you hang around your neck figuratively, and it looks good. But I didn't know what book two was going to be, and I certainly had no idea about book three. So
Wow.
I think you. But as you write, you start to kind of put little ideas about the characters, and you think, well, I don't know what's Scarlett's backstory. She's clearly damaged. She's there's something in her life that's made her into this outlaw. She's keeping pretty quiet about it, but there's a few little hints. And then what about Albert? Where's he come from? And you can start to seed little things in, which actually you can then pick up as a writer. You pick up on it yourself in subsequent books. So it's just a sort of little thing. It's like you're a farmer. You put the seeds in, and then you have to wait for it to grow. You can't be impatient. You can't see the whole thing straight away. You have to just write the first story, and then you take a little breather, and okay, we've got these things, we can use those to build, to build. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but you build you build the next book out using the things that you planted in the first book.
I mean, that's extraordinary. That's in a lot of ways, that's a risk, because
It is
you're
risky,
going
yeah.
out. Yeah, you're building this whole story, and then things aren't working, and then you change, you go back and you fix and you delete whole chapters or delete whole scenes to
Yeah,
make that
yeah.
story work. And that's an incredible, I mean, it's a journey to, because see, if I was trying to do what you're doing, which I would be impossible, but I would have to know every single detail, like this is what's happening. And it's a form of bravery to be able to write like that, to
Well,
go forward into that kind of wilderness.
well, do you know what I mean? I think in one sense it is a risk, but you're absolutely right in the way you describe it. In a funny sort of way, as an author, you're doing the same thing as your characters. In this,
Yes, yeah.
in my kind of book, obviously there are different kinds of books, but in my kind of book, the heroes are going off, they're exploring, they're finding out stuff, they're learning, they're uncovering things. And actually that's, in a way, it's kind of, that's fine, because actually that means that as an author you are also sharing in that journey, and you're uncovering things and finding it, and you don't necessarily see it all at the beginning. I think it's always good not to know all the answers at the beginning, because but you have faith in yourself that you are able to bring everything together later. It's not to say it's not difficult. Like, so the last book, the legendary Scarlett and Browne, which just coming out in America shortly. That's I was supposed to write that in a year, and it took me 2 years, because it was
Wow.
difficult. I found it hard to successfully bring together all the different threads that I was playing with. But that's okay. You have to just have faith and keep plodding away.
Well, and I remember I wrote, I mean, it was years ago, so it's not, I'm not even trying. I don't even, you don't even need to know the title, but I wrote this book that did not sell well at all. And I was
Right.
very ashamed of that. But like you just described, I felt very much like I was going on a journey with the characters and learning. This is why now I want to just plot everything out, which I
Right.
haven't written much since this. But I think that book didn't sell, and that's okay. But that one prepared me, I think, more than anything in my life to actually be a dad. And so
Oh,
it was
really?
it was a
Okay.
different sort of reward because just what the
Yeah.
character was going through and learning, I had never learned these things, and I could never learn them outside of what I was writing. So it's just it's a journey in and of itself
No, no,
to be
it
writing.
really is. No, I think you're absolutely right. You right. It's a big undertaking to any kind of creative act, or it's a big undertaking. You're making something that didn't exist before.
Yeah,
It's a big deal, and you certainly can't tell whether or not anyone's going to like it. Um, but that shouldn't stop you doing it. You're doing it for yourself. You're trying to tell the story, and you do it, you do it to the best of your ability. And I think you're right that you always, even when at the end of the day you go, okay, well, it wasn't quite what I thought, or it didn't get the best reception that I wanted. You are always going to benefit from having done it, even if the benefit is then in the next thing you do, you suddenly know 100 things you didn't know before, and then you're away, and the next one benefits. So yeah, I think it's I always tell you, I'm going to go into schools. I say to the kids, if you like writing, you throw yourself in, you experiment. You don't. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. It's all part of the journey that you're going on. Yeah, journey is a good, it's a good metaphor, isn't it, for it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, um, it's I worked at a program where people were always really, where people came because they were struggling with life, and for them to move forward, the best thing they could do was just take one step, whatever step they could do, take that
Yeah,
step. And it's the same with writing. If you're struggling, just take whatever step you're able to. And in that interview that I listened to with Amy McCaw, I'm sorry, I'm going back to that again, but she had just given birth, and she was talking about just putting in 1,000 words a day
yeah.
just to write. And if she did that for 70 days, she'd have a novel. And so just pushing
Yeah,
forward.
exactly right. More and more, I think the interest is in the process. At the end of the day, you want to have a nice, lovely book with a lovely cover that people like. That's an objective. But actually, why do you do it? You do it because of the actual fun and the interest, the satisfaction of creating
Yeah.
that thing. So it's about each day. It's about the challenges. It's about the kind of bad days. It's about the good days. It's about the solving problems. Like when I go into, often if I go to an art gallery, they have the beautiful finished works of art on the wall, but they also sometimes have like the artist sketchbooks and their the drafts and the notes, and often I find that more interesting than the finished artwork.
Yeah.
You're looking
Mhm.
at okay, how did they do it? How did Rembrandt, and what kind of process was he going in? And then you look at these little sketches, and they often have more energy and more sort of fascination than the end, the sort of slick end result. So I feel like as a writer, you have to enjoy that process, and at the okay, fine, at the end of the day you want a book, obviously, but you have to enjoy that, the art, the craft, the day by day sawing and cutting and hammering to create the thing.
And even what they disregarded, like it's amazing to see
Yeah,
what they're like. This isn't any good, but you look at it and you're just like, this is astounding, and this is in a
yeah,
museum now, and they
yeah.
disregarded it.
Yeah, yeah,
That
absolutely. That's the little shavings that come off. They're kind of doing
yeah.
the carpentry, and the little shavings, and you're looking at those, go, oh wow, it's just, yeah,
Just
this,
keep that. Well, so I've got the more questions on Scarlett and Brown. You had mentioned before we started the interview that uh, a lot of it, because we talked about how kind of difficult the past 4 or 5 years have just been weird and intense, and a
yeah,
lot happened. But what's become meaningful to you, and I think to a lot of people, is our relationships, who's a true friend, and those conversations that you can have and people who can help lift you. And then you
Yeah.
started to relate that to the books, the people you meet along the way, the finding the right people, and how that's a theme
Right.
in your books. Can you just elaborate
Yeah.
on that? What did you mean by finding the right people?
Well, I think it's always been a theme that kind of naturally crops up in my books. Even going back to the ones I did 20 years ago when I was writing about the genie. Bartimaeus, he's a kind of slave of this boy magician, and the magicians kind of use the genies to do various things for them, and then the ordinary people, the commoners, are subjugated as well. And then actually by the end, you've got a girl who's a commoner, and Bartimaeus, and the boy magician. All three of these main characters, they all come from different groups, and they all initially hate each other, and by the end they're actually finding a common ground, and actually looking after each other, and looking for a better future. And with Lockwood Co, it's a similar thing, that you've got disparate characters who again they bicker, they get grumpy with each other, but fundamentally they come together and they work as a team, and they overcome the dangers of the wider world. So it's all that kind of friendship, companionship, sort of love in unexpected places is something that always is there. And it's the same in Scarlett and Browne, that Scarlett is very tough, fierce character, and she's very good at killing people who get in her way, and the boy Albert is very innocent and very naive and kind of very welcoming, and absolutely gets on her nerves when she first meets him. But of course, it's a yin and yang thing. The two of them, they each provide something that the other one does not have. And once they kind of get this sort of partnership going, other people who are kind of wounded or in need, or they sort of get caught up in the gravitational pull, and they kind of start to revolve around them. So by the time you start the series, Scarlett is on her own in the wilderness. She has no one, and then by the end of the last book, without wanting to give any spoilers, there's a sense in which she and Albert are at the heart of this kind of community, a small community of unlikely characters. But there's a kind of hope in that, and I think these are it's fairly universal. It's universally important, isn't it, that we all seek to find friends and companions, and they aren't necessarily coming from the obvious places. I think that's an important point. It's not just people who happen to be the same as you. You find this sort of thing everywhere. So that's, I guess, one of the themes that I play around with in my fiction.
Yeah, and you've described it as a Western. I mean, it really is a Western, and I think um, one of the recurring dominant themes in a Western is redemption, where you
Right.
you have this outlaw who has a shady past. Something's gone on. You don't really know a lot of these outlaws. They come into town, or the town goes and gets the outlaw to come and help them with the problem.
Yeah.
Um, and it's in the service that they render to whoever it is in the story, that they find redemption for themselves. And I'm seeing that. I'm halfway through the second book um, right now, and I'm certainly seeing that with Scarlett.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
things in Albert's past as well that he's grappling with.
Yeah.
Um, but it's on this journey that they're finding redemption. You know, you talked about finding the right people. I mean, what are some other themes? What was it that you felt like was the most important message to convey, uh, maybe in the whole series, that you really wanted readers to come away with a sense of understanding?
Yeah, I think at the core of it, I suppose Scarlet is the core of it, and you're kind of halfway through, but there's a sense in which in the first book you find out quite a lot about Albert. You don't find out too much about Scarlet. She keeps it pretty hidden. She's pretty you kind of know she's damaged, but by the time you get to the end of the second book, you have a much clearer picture of what it is that motivates her. And I think there is. I mean, I think it is about redemption, and it's about finding um, a means to sort of heal yourself when you have been hurt by circumstances. And the way that you do this in my books is basically by teaming up with finding other people who unexpectedly will be able to heal the wounds in you, and or give you the strength, I guess, to confront the things that you'd rather run away from. The first book, them going down the Thames, is very much them running away from stuff. They're being chased. They're running away from that. They're also kind of running away from their past as well. In the second book, they kind of have other characters that they've now become friendly with, and actually they kind of start having to run in the opposite direction in order to help their friends. So there's actually just almost like a reverse movement. And by the end of the third book, they're not just helping out a couple of people; they're trying to help out a whole community. So there's a kind of movement through the whole
Right.
series from being absolutely just an individual on their own, out for themselves and nobody else. And by the end, actually, it's a complete reversal, and you're looking out not just for your pals, but you're looking out for people that you don't like, people that you are essentially enemies with, but you're still trying to help them in some in some difficult circumstance. So ultimately, it's about your position in society and about your responsibilities to society as a whole, even if that society is hostile or annoying or doesn't quite share your values. And I so these themes are all sort of bubbling away in there. I mean, I don't want to stress it too much, because obviously the reason why you read the books is because there's lots of good action and silly
Right.
jokes
Right.
and
Right.
monsters and stuff. But these are the kind of values, I guess, that are underpinning what I'm trying to write.
Yeah, and to that end, I mean, there's an incredible amount of which is stuff I wasn't expecting, like giant otters and cannibals, and I mean, I was not expecting some of these things to occur in the book. When you first hear that it's a Western, it's a dystopian Western. Okay, you have some idea of what to expect, but it was
Yeah.
just surprise after surprise after surprise. Albert, what he's capable of, it's a big. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just not what you're thinking with him at all. It's a very fun, remarkable book, and you have this incredible talent. I don't think I've ever read another author who has it to the same level. You have this really amazing gift of there could be some sort of horrifying or scary or dark situation, and then you have humor right next to it, and it doesn't cancel out the horror of the situation, because that's
No.
important, but it
Yeah.
balances it in this very where you're okay being here and listening to this, even though it's a scary or a dark situation. And that's an incredible gift. I mean, how do you maintain that balance? Because I know sometimes, you might be writing something and think it's funny for you, but maybe it's not funny for other people,
Oh
and
yeah.
maybe it is a little too dark. How do you maintain that balance between humor and maybe the darker elements in your writing?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that I don't always get it right. Certainly, I don't always get it right first time. So sometimes I'll write scenes where it's really quite dark, and I'll throw in a couple of slightly sort of bit of black humor, And actually, when I give it to my wife to read, she's like the first person to read it, and she'll she'll put a little mark by it. It's like, no, that joke that didn't land. That
Yeah.
felt it's too it's too grim. You can't make a joke about that, or that's not the right place for it, or the joke was rubbish anyway. So you don't always get it right. But I mean, I think it's an important. You've hit one of the key things I try and do, I suppose, which is to if you can treat your subject seriously, because your characters are going through life and death things. They have real grief, they have real lack, or they're damaged. This is not something that you're going to undercut. So you're playing true to the characters, and you're playing true to your audience. But if you just did that, it would all become too depressing. So you put in humor, because as we know, humor is part. is part of life. Even when things are bad, you can still see the humor in a lot of aspects of life. And actually, you need to have it. Otherwise, it's not an honest book. It would be completely dishonest to remove the dark stuff, but it's also dishonest to keep away the humor in situations. So I try to include both, and I'll try to again, it's about rhythm. You try to have a dark bit. If you're doing Lockwood Co, my heroes will go out into some scary place and they're dealing with some terrifying ghost. Then there might be the odd joke, but fundamentally, what I'm trying to do is to deal with the dark stuff. And then when they finish that, they go back to their house. They're in a safe place. They can kind of almost unwind, and the reader can unwind as well. You kind of, well, that was scary, but now they're okay, and they start making little jokes, and everyone can kind of just get into a different place. So it works as a narrative. It's a good narrative sort of tactic to be able to go from one to the other, sometimes in quick succession. And exactly the same is true with Scarlett and Browne. And you kind of see it in the two characters, that Scarlett, to begin with, Scarlett's very, very serious, very angry, and she's she gets crossed about something, she'll get her pistol out. Albert is totally wide-eyed and kind of naive, and they're guaranteed to collide, and that collision provides lots of there's lots of humor that comes out of it, but also not just humor. It kind of you understand the characters better, because she's getting really annoyed about his foolish comments, and and then through that you can build them up. You can just keep the narrative bubbling along. Humor sort of aerates everything, so it doesn't become too heavy. It's like the old loaf of bread in the oven. You've got to have the right amount of yeast. You can have heavy bread, that's fine, but actually what you want is something that has a bit of lightness to it, so that it's easy to consume.
George would love that analogy that you just
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good food analogy.
Yeah, it was. I will say, so there is a scene. It's early on in the series. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but very early in the series. And it made me. I was listening to it because I was doing a lot of driving at the time, so I was listening to it on audiobook, and it's where Albert, and there's an incident with a bear. And the bear is dead, and he has a reaction to it, and I don't know what it was, because it would be unbelievable if it wasn't Albert, because of how you had already presented him, how you had shown him. And I was like, he's taking this very seriously, and I literally I laughed. It was out loud. It startled the people that I was with, because it was just such a funny reaction, and it was a very tense situation. And then there was this great, and there's just scene after scene after scene. I love Joe when they introduce him on the raft, and how he talks. I just always thought, this man is my speed. I like how he communicates. Well, then, just to wrap up on Scarlett and Browne, and then I have a couple of Lockwood Co questions, because I know I'd be remiss. They'd come after me, the fan base, if I didn't ask them. But I talk about this. I named this series A Literal Journey, because I love stories. A good story. If you have a good story, if you know a good story, if you see life, you find a story for your own life, like, this is why I'm here, and this is what I want to do while I'm here. You adopt a story for how you want to live your life, right? And in contrast, you can adopt a negative story where you believe very negative things about yourself. I'm this and this and this, and that's why I can't ever do this.
Right.
So if you're able to adopt a good story, you're able to overcome a lot of challenges, a lot of things. And you have become a very successful writer, and your stories are all about, overcoming challenges. I mean, all good stories are. Lockwood Co, what I loved about that, it was this, especially the fifth book, it was the show of force of life over death. Even though things were very grim, just the power of life over death. And I loved that. For this, what was what was the most, if you're thinking about a journey, what was the most challenging part of writing Scarlett and Browne? And then how did you overcome that? How did you push through to get to where you're celebrating the third and final book?
Um, yeah, there were a few challenges along the way. I think the ending was hard. Well, the ending of the last book. As I say, it took me a couple of years to do this, and I always I had two or three really strong ideas about the third book. And one of the ideas was to do with the ending, and I had a really kind of quite a clear idea, like, oh yeah, the whole series is going to end in this particular way with this kind of a scene. And so I was working towards this all the time. And at some point I began to realize that I wasn't able to properly mesh this idea, this really sort of strong idea, with what I'd done. And I was, it's like, you're digging the tunnel, and there's the end point, and you kind of your tunnel's missing it. You're kind of coming, you're going through the through the ground just next to it, but you're not actually hitting the point where
Yeah,
you're aiming for. And it took me a long time to accept that I was going to have to change the ending, because I really wanted to have this particular ending.
really.
And to begin with, I actually did a kind of version where it kind of had it, and it was merging it, and it had about six things happening at once, and that that I was losing the logic of it. There was something in there that wasn't right, and as I'm sure it's very hard when you've committed to something. It's very hard to admit to yourself that actually it's not right. Because of course, once you admit that, then okay, that what does that mean? Well, it means I've got to change all this stuff, and then you end up going right back and having to alter all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. It took me a long time, and eventually I kind of had that clarity. I actually, and again, this is a sort of thing that I felt like you need to have a good reader. That my wife read the book with me as I was writing it, and so eventually I got into this really difficult place. I kind of sat with her and like, this isn't working, and we kind of thrashed out. Well, okay, if you remove that thing, what are you left with? Well, actually, I was left with all kinds of stuff which I could make into a proper finale. So yeah, I think my sort of tip for the top is always to is to have someone out there who you trust to read it, tell you when it's good, discuss it when it's not good. And little by little you find your way through, like your characters do. You find your way through the maze, and you get your finished book.
She's your number one beta reader, as it were? She's the one who reads every draft, and
Yeah,
that's
so
that's commitment.
yeah, yeah. No, well, no, it is. It's I don't show her everything, and I don't show her everything, instantly. I'll
Yeah,
for a long, but there'll come a point where I've got a chunk here, and usually I'm starting to get a bit worried about it for some reason, so I'll hand it over, and it's really good. Someone you can, obviously my editors of this will also be able to help me.
sure.
Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
before I get to them, I kind of want to have tried to resolve some of these issues. And no, Gina's great. So she does a lot of work helping me, making me cups of tea, and calming me down when I'm getting really kind of,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't see a way through this.
And you said in a previous interview that there was a time early in your marriage where she said, yes, you can take, I don't know,
Yeah,
however long, a year to write a book.
yeah, yeah.
Which
She gave
which
me a
which
year. Yeah.
which book was that?
Well, at that point, I hadn't written. I'd written a couple of novels, which had been published. I'd had stuff published, but I was doing it very much freelance, very
Okay.
very much part time, and I was always grumbling about the fact that I hadn't got enough time to really kind of commit myself to it. And around that same time, I kind of had the initial idea for this series about the genie,
Wow.
but I was kind of excited by the idea, but again, I didn't have time to really work on it. So this was the point. We got married, and she said, go away, and yeah, I'll give you a year. You can just do a year, and if you don't earn anything and it doesn't work, then just go back to your other job. it did take about sort of about 6 months before I'd written enough of this idea that I was able to sell that, and that was when it changed. Everything changed. But
that was Bartimaeus. That was
that was
Bartimaeus.
Bartimaeus, yeah.
Wow.
So if I hadn't had that time, that you need a little bit of space around you, and as we all struggle with life and work and kids and commitments, and it's just having that little bit of time, a little bit of time each day to work on it. And yeah, so I was very lucky that Gina gave me that time.
I mean, that
Yeah.
must have been a funny story to tell the in-laws. He's writing a book about a genie, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a hard sell.
Yeah.
But then it sold, so
Yeah. No, the
bounced
first,
right
that's
back
right.
up.
So suddenly it was, very different story. You could kind of look people in the eye and say, well, okay, now actually we have got we've got lots of
Yeah,
editions, and people want to make it into a film, and so suddenly it became a different story. But you can't, like we said earlier, you can't when you throw yourself into something, you don't know, it might be the one that has a great success, or it might not, and actually you still have to commit yourself to
right.
the project, give what you can to it, and then eventually I've given enough. Now it's time to do something else.
Well, this is wonderful. I mean, I love the series, and I'm so, like I said, I'm halfway through the second book right now, and then I'm looking
Right.
forward to the third book, because I can't get it like everybody else in the UK right now. I can only get
It won't
the
be long.
Audible. Audible is, I believe, I've got it on pre-order, and that's, I believe, in March. I believe,
Yeah. Yeah.
which would be the same time as the paperback. I would, or hardcover, one of the two.
That's right.
I
I think I can't remember. It like something like the 24th or 25th of March, I think. I can't remember. Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
No, this
excellent.
is
Look at that.
that's the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, I like these covers more than the ones they're doing in the UK. But you don't have to comment on that. I'm just saying, this is,
Well,
I think these are beautiful.
they're great covers. Although they are they are changing the covers.
Are
So
they?
the third one's going to be different. Yeah.
Okay.
Covers are really difficult to get, to get
Yeah.
right, and everyone has different opinions. When I go around to schools, I kind of show covers from different countries, and it's really fascinating. You can say, hey guys, do you like this one? Do you like this one? And you get themes, but people have different
Yeah.
opinions. It's really hard to get it right.
Well, I think that one definitely appeals to it's
Yeah.
the same genre for Lockwood Co. That, at least that cover, I would say it would pull in that audience. But I love that. And then I've seen it's the color. It's basically different shades of color with the silhouettes.
Yeah.
I like
I've
those
got
ones
I've got
as
them.
well.
Yeah, I've got it. So that's the
Yeah,
that's number three. That's the legendary. I mean,
I
they're
like,
sort of
yeah,
quite. They're
the
very
the,
good.
the
Yeah.
wanted poster kind of look.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
font.
Yeah. So they've got an integrity. I think
Yeah.
they're very good, but they are different. The American one is much more kinetic. It's got that energy, which is very exciting.
Well, that's how
Um,
we do things. We're very loud over here. Just explosions of colors,
hey,
fireworks,
nothing wrong with that.
America, all that stuff. So, well, I would be remiss. We've got just a few more minutes. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a couple of questions about Lockwood and Co.
Okay.
I think I have some juicy ones.
Oh, have you? Okay, right. I'll get ready. I'll
Yeah,
take my cup of tea, very
yeah,
Lockwoody.
yeah. I think, and I hope we'll send these to Georgia, and then she can figure out what she wants to do with these answers.
Okay.
First of all, I'm going to ask you again about what happened in Miss Bennet's tomb. Do you have any idea? Do you have a vague idea of what? I know it's kind of a fun literary device to be like, "Oh, we don't really talk about it."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think even Lockwood and Lucy, they tend
it-
not to go into too much detail on that one.
it's too
Um,
traumatic.
I
They're
think it was quite
suppressing it.
traumatic. I
Yeah,
think we know that Lockwood. He's got a few sort of claw marks on his coat that
yeah.
relating to this. Yeah. I don't want to upset your viewers. I think it's better
They're
to
your
draw a
viewers.
line.
They're not mine. They're going to be yours. These are the Lockwood and Co. people. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's a good question. I have not seen you answer a question like this, but
Okay. Okay.
at the end of the fifth book, we're introduced to a character named Ezekiel, and Ezekiel, I'm not going to reveal too much, but he's attached to a source. And from my readings, I've read that book maybe 4 or 5 times. I don't, I don't, I don't think they ever. I don't have a memory of them ever destroying that source. I know they took it. I know the authorities took it, but
Yeah.
I don't have a memory of them destroying that source. And so my question is for you
Mm.
is there the possibility that Ezekiel could reappear somewhere else,
That is a good question.
or was his source destroyed? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you might be right that I don't think it's ever quite specified
Hmm.
that it was destroyed. I mean, things got pretty messy at the end at Fitt's house. You know, there was a lot of a lot of action going on. A lot of things were getting sort of thrown around. But you're right. I don't think it's sort of actually set out in black and white. About it. I feel like there's always a potential, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, we end the series with quite a few things like that actually, which are you don't quite know what's going to happen. You know, the
Right.
you don't quite know about the skull, the fate of the skull. You don't, in some respects, you don't know what's going to happen with Lockwood and Lucy and the gang. You see them sort of that's the final thing, and then their story continues, and the book finishes, and you know there's always that potential that you could go back in and find out more. Ezekiel is, I guess, part of that. You know, you don't know, you don't know. I you know, as a writer, it's always good, I think,
Yeah.
to leave things a little bit open so that because that's what life's like, isn't it? Things come to an end, but then does it? Things suddenly reappear, you know. So yeah, I'm not being very specific, but I'm kind of agreeing that there's always potential for further stories down the line.
Well, yeah, that was a very political answer. It's very like
Yeah.
definitively maybe, just right there. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh yeah.
then my question and specifically is, what in your mind was his source destroyed?
No, I think it might still be around.
Okay, that's good. Okay, you think okay, that's good. Okay, then the only other question I have in this regard is,
Yeah.
I like I said, I do a lot of driving all around the United States. And when I'm in the West, so I lived in Arizona. We're in Utah. We're actually we're 30 minutes away from the Salt Lake airport, but
Oh
it's
wow.
we're kind of closer to a lot of the rural communities and stuff. And when I drive in the American West, I see a lot of ghost towns and ghost structures, old
Wow.
pioneer buildings. There's a Mormon pioneer graveyard just down the street from us, and you go there,
Wow.
has these really old graves and old dates on them. And it's made me wonder if there's in your mind if there is a potential for Lockwood and Co. They're the experts in London. They're the heroes of London, and I'm sure there's other countries. It could be the United States, but it could be somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
That they're struggling with this problem, and there's
Yeah.
it's you know, and so who do they contact? They contact Lockwood and Co. Do you think there's a potential for a series where they're called to go and help in other areas? Because Portland Row is such an integral part to their
Yeah, that's a
community.
great point. I mean, certainly when I was doing the series, Portland Row was a kind of key. It was kind of like a key member of the cast. You know, it was you always were going back there. You know that everything kind of revolves around it. But you know, going forward, you know, I absolutely I think there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't have Lockwood and Co. going further afield and having having adventures in other countries. I've always sort of thought that if I ever wrote another Lockwood book, it would probably be shorts. It would probably be short stories. It would be kind of a case book of different sort of adventures they have in
Right.
different places. And you absolutely, there is no reason why you couldn't go just to your neck of the forest. Could we go to the Mormon graveyard? That sounds like
Yeah.
it's bound to be haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, oh, totally. And I suppose the only thing is that as a writer, you've got to write about something or at least you've got some experience of,
Right.
to make it to, because if I started talking about Mormon graveyards without having actually been there and having kind of looked at it, researched it, and talked to people, then the danger is that it would feel pretty thin. So I guess that's always the issue. But in terms of in theory, absolutely, they go on holiday, and whenever they go, there's always like some some ghost that pops out and causes trouble, and they have, oh, okay, we're gonna have to deal with this before we can go and relax.
Well, and I noticed, yeah, you've kept up a tradition of publishing a story. Is it around Christmas time? A short story.
Yeah,
I
I
saw it.
quite like that. I mean, Christmas is a good time for good time for ghost stories.
Charles
You
Dickens,
know,
agrees.
Charles Dickens, famously, M.R. James used to, great English ghost story writer. He used to write ones especially for telling at Christmas. So yeah, so it's a good time of year for it. And yeah, I've done a couple. So we'll see if I can do a few more. We'll have to find out.
Well, those are good answers, actually. It's whatever happens, regardless. I think you ended the series on a pitch perfect note. I
Oh,
mean,
great,
it was
thank you.
just
Yeah,
even those
yeah,
loose ends. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it.
yeah.
There's not that
I
sense
think
of finality. You don't want that.
no, I think that's right. I think that's important. Yeah, it's more in a weird sort of way. You're talking about a book with ghosts and everything, but in a way, it's more real if you keep it, if you keep some of those ends a bit loose, because that's what life's like. You in reality, we never get to the end of the story. There's always another chapter.
Thank you so much for watching this interview with Jonathan Stroud. Really, it warms my heart in a good way, not like a heartburn or heart attack sort of way. A good, like, heartwarming feeling. If you liked this video, please do the stuff. Like it, subscribe. I've got plenty more content on the way with lots more authors, lots more great stories. So again, if you liked it, do the like and subscribe thing. And also share it with your friends, even if they don't want it. I dare you.